From the grind to the glory, one man's journey proves that heart, hustle, and determination change the game. This is Catch as Catch Can with George Tinsley Sr., where adversity is met head-on and champions are made. Here's George.
Welcome to Catch as Catch Can. I'm George Tinsley Sr., former professional athlete, entrepreneur, author, and your host. This is a space where we sit down with leaders who face real challenges, learned real lessons, and kept moving forward.
Turning obstacles into opportunity.
Joining me today is Dr. Tommy Rhee, a Naval Aircrew veteran, sports chiropractor, and expert in topical regenerative medicine based in Tampa, Florida. A former chiropractor for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and UCLA Athletics. He has spent nearly 2 decades helping elite athletes recover and optimize performance. He is the founder and CEO of RheeGen, a non-invasive regenerative therapy, and author of The Future of Regenerative Medicines. Welcome, Dr. Rhee.
Hey, George. Thank you very much for that great intro.
Oh, I tell you, this is probably one of the top shows we've done here in a minute. That's really, really highly technical. So you're going to have to really take your time and explain to everyone exactly what you do. But it's an honor to have you on the program today and get to know your background. We're about turning obstacles to opportunities. We'll start off talking about what you're doing today. And then I want to dive back into how Dr. Tommy Rhee got started as an early youth and got to this particular point. So tell us what you're doing today.
Well, today I'm still in practice. I still see athletes and weekend warriors, everyday people, and it's all about just getting them active and getting them, back into that world from pain, free world, and really just understanding what they're trying to achieve. And my goal right now is to do everything I can with my ability and my knowledge to get that kind of like goal set in their patient's care.
Mm-hmm. So you're based today in Tampa, is that correct?
Yep, Tampa, Florida.
Tampa, Florida. And are you still working with the Bucs at all? Or?
No, that was a period between 2015, 2018. And then after that, it was just like anything else. You remember those days when you're a professional athlete and the demand of traveling and just working with a large team. It just compounds the stress of running a practice, having yourself be obligated to go these travels and doing these kind of extra stuff. It was just too much for me. So I switched gears and I still treat athletes, but I'm going into a little more developmental of that spreading out that kind of care with the, increasing knowledge of regenerative medicine, with the knowledge and a product, and just getting it into people that understands and will understand how to elongate their tissues.
Mm-hmm. So are you doing more teaching today or practicing or both?
Kind of both, like I have my practice, I see people, but in addition, just like these shows, I talk and I try to really make things simple to understand about stem cell therapy, regenerative medicine. What is that? People get confused because they think that these cells are so complicating and it's doing a lot of interesting thing and you have to have these live cells. It's not about that. It's about the signal. Our tissue is ready for it to do its job. It's just that we don't have that signal. Just like a cell phone call, the message is there, but you kind of lose that signal. So you have to increase that signal.
Okay. So take us today in your focus. Is it on any one particular part of the body, the chemistry, or is it just total?
No, I'm a musculoskeletal guy, sports med, right? So I'm looking at the soft tissue around the joint. So I look at like muscle, tendon, ligaments, cartilage, bones, stuff like that to help kind of get that athlete or that weekend warrior or everyday person be active. Right. But interesting enough that regenerative medicine just doesn't target that. It targets all the other cells because you have that signaling ability. So when we age, we lose that signal and you have to get a signal that's stronger. So then you can have that type of regenerative or the recycling of your tissue to help heal that tissue from a workout or injury.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just a normal everyday athlete or wannabe athlete that's running, that's, participating in golf, or when do I know that I need to come see Dr. Rhee? What?
Oh, number one, pain is your first indicator. When you have a pain that you think about, like, the old saying, no pain, no gain, and you work out through it or you play through it. Well, you have to identify what kind of pain you're dealing with. Is it like a pain of cardiovascular when you're tired and you're fatigued, or is it from an injury? If you feel that you don't know, well, come see someone like me. But if you
Okay.
know it's an injury, then you definitely have to come see me, because you have like a micro tear, and you can get back and recover faster. When you start using that over and over again, that micro tear becomes a major tear or a rupture, and now you have a complete, like a gone ligament or a tendon. Now you're looking in the medical side of the surgical kind of repairing, of doing kind of like taking that tendon, sewing it back on there. So you want to catch it as soon as possible.
Mhm. So let's take a professional athlete like Luka Doncic, that plays with the Lakers, that strained a muscle in his thigh, and he goes to treatment. How is that? A elongated process that you would work on, or is this something that is a long-term care scenario, or is from a sports player that's participating presently? Is this something that can be turned around pretty quickly? Using
Yeah.
that example.
So when you think about like the belly of the muscle has a lot of like blood flow, a lot of capillaries, a lot of exchange in there. So when you have an injury in that spot, it's a faster recovery. It's not like a tendon or a ligament that's avascular, meaning there's not that much blood vessels going to that type of tissue. So when you
Mhm.
look at the muscle, the belly of the muscle, now you're thinking about it's going to be faster. But you have to be careful. You don't want to go, some therapists, what they do is they'll do like the typical, like they'll increase the circulation, they'll excite the nitric oxide, and then they'll get some of the inflammatory world to increase. And then there goes your building blocks. Perfect. But then the next step they typically should not do, which they do, I don't know why, but then they start stretching them out on the same day. You don't want to stretch it out, because you're trying to bind the tissue up. You want to collect it. So when you collect the tissue, it basically mends together. It's like a cut on your skin. If you have a cut in your skin, you don't keep spreading your cut apart. You don't want to do that. You want to keep it mended. And in time, less than 4 or 5 days with the right top environment, it would heal fast. Then
Mhm.
once it heals, then you go through the stretching process. So when you see someone with maybe a quad strain or something on the muscle that's strained and it's not healing, it's always, to me, what I notice is it's about the therapy and the aggressiveness they're trying to get. They think they need to get them back in one day. If you just wait another extra couple more days, you'll get them back to 100%. So it's that premature going back. It's like almost like overtraining. You're not giving your body the ability to recover, to get proper mending back in there. So
Mhm.
when I hear about those muscle tears or issues like that, it's always about starting the first step. Just get the tissue mended together. Don't go into stretching. Don't engage it. Don't do anything. So I hope that he's doing the right therapy there. And when you hear things like that muscle, kind of like that strain that's not healing correctly, well, I always say you're getting them back too quick. You're trying to engage it too soon before it mends together.
Mhm. Okay. Okay. That's very interesting because, and you hear the stories about how the teams want, obviously, the coaches want to get these guys back on the court or back on the field as soon as possible. But the sports department, or that end of it, is mandating that there's only a certain amount of time that they're able to participate, even when they come back. They have time management, if you will. That was, of course, when I played, you never heard of that. It was, spit
rub,
on it and come back out there.
rub some dirt on that thing. Get yourself going. Don't worry about that.
Exactly. That was so take us back. Tell us how it all started. How Dr. Tommy Rhee first got started in life.
Well, like anybody else, I was an active kid. I loved sports. I played sports. When you're a good athlete in every sport, it becomes naturally like that's what you need to do. But, my dad was a surgeon. I was around that environment of him taking care of patients, and I saw his patient care, and I knew that that was the path I wanted, because when you see a patient enjoy the outcome of my dad's care, and then you see how he responded, the patient responded, I said, "Oh, that's fun. That sounds like a cool thing to do." And then I try to, marry the two together, sports and that doctor care. And that's why sports medicine was pretty appealing to me. I knew that I wasn't going to be a professional athlete because I'm only at 5-0. So I know that I'm not going to be that kind of like athlete in, the professional or even collegiate, that higher division. But I knew that I was going to be in some way part of sports. So I was thinking about the supporting mechanism of teams, which is the medical side of it. So from there, I just knew that just like an athlete trying to do his best, trying to get his best out of himself, I did the same thing. I decided to find the best doctor, and then I followed him. I knew the concept of what athletes want. They want the best. They want to, get themselves back on the field. And then you just have to kind of like mold yourself into that person that has the ability to learn more, reach out, and then be that extra person that goes into that, that research, that an alternative. Can you heal faster? Can you do this better? And that's who I am. I'm that kind of guy that likes challenges and put upon myself to say, all right, let's solve this together. And my outcome is when these athletes do great back on the field, when they start winning like NCAAs in college, or when they're in the pros, they're becoming all pros. And that's because of, a part is me, a part is, of course, everybody else, but I had a little piece in there.
So where'd you grow up?
I grew up here in Tampa, Florida.
Oh, okay. Okay. And you went to high school locally and college locally?
Yeah, so I went to Lato and Gaither High School here in Tampa, Florida. Played sports there. And then after that, I was that rebellious kid, typical kid that we all went through. I went through a little harder, so I thought I knew everything, and I'm just that typical kid that needed a little straightening out. And who straightened me out? The military. So I went to Navy and did great jobs. Let me see. I flew in the Navy. It was a backseater of this jet, carrier base. Did 66 catapults and launches off that thing. Had a great time. And in the military, that's where I really matured and learned that, look, it's not about your confidence, your ego. It's about having a little bit of an ability to like start a project, finish it, confidence, and then, really back up with action, not so much talking.
Trying to get a little closer feel for your decision making and motivation from coming through high school, for our audience that's out there that's listening in, that your dad was your early influence in the medical field. But as you got into school, you got involved in athletics, and that's what you wanted to do. But your education, tell us about that part of the deal, how you were motivated to pursue your next step in education.
Well, here's the thing. Okay, so to go into more detail about my pathway. So that kid, the high school kid, I mean, I was not, how would you say it? I mean, I was bright. I knew I could do things, but I didn't apply myself. I was one of those guys that like, I think I know everything. I don't need this subject. I don't need this teacher. I don't need these grades. I know everything. And that's what got me to the point where I got into trouble. But I always had that sort of that baseline, good knowledge and things. So I knew that my destiny was to go be a doctor and go down that pathway. So after high school, I got into some trouble and the military straightened me out. Now, if it wasn't for the military, I'd probably be exactly where I should be, in jail, somewhere bad. But the military set some good standards to me and said to me, look, you know what you want to do, live in the future, set your little micro goals, accomplish those things, take those stepping stones, and then become that person. And because of like going through like flight training and all these, I mean, we had 18 months of training in this. And the neat thing about that is that it taught me how to memorize. I have a little, I don't know if it's a learning disability, but I have that dyslexia and ADHD and all that stuff. Just like a lot of us have that stuff. But in my case, it was, how would you say, maybe an excuse for me not to do things. But once you go to the military, and then it teaches you how to really break things down simple, so then you can do those tasks. So once they really put those like that kind of like that foundation in me, now when I get out of the military, I apply to everything. School. So I'm going to school. I'm back at school. I go out to California. I was stationed in San Diego, and so I decided to stay out in California. And I went to school, a community college there called Orange Coast College. Played football, had my grades, dean's list, did all that stuff, and then continue on. And then for some reason, when you start becoming that confident person and then start accomplishing things, it builds up that almost like that wall of like fixing yourself into a goal and accomplishing it becomes not a challenge, but just a part of the process.
Mhm.
So because of that, everything seems easy. So, like from going through college, going to school, getting to where I want to go and getting to UCLA, and then just getting all these accomplishments happen because of what I've been through, I'm learning, or I'm advancing into.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it was a fun road for me, and it still continues on. That's why I'm excited about the new chapter I'm in right now.
Yeah. Well, you can certainly feel that. I feel that in your presentation here or the conversation. But I want to, from the standpoint of those that are listening in, to kind of highlight what you've said with respect to the different successes that you had. And even though you ran into a couple of stumbling blocks in coming out of high school, I'm sure your parents were putting pressure on you for keep good grades and so forth, and you're dealing with that as well as that next step. And you didn't go right into college, you went into the military, as you said, and that's where the structure really took place of understanding for those that are out there that are kind of looking at what you've done and how successful you are today. Would you
Yeah. Oh
agree
yeah.
with that? Yeah.
Yeah. Here's a funny thing. So at a certain point, I was so rebellious. I mean, I was just a bad boy, one of the typical kid that you don't want to be around. It's my parents. I mean, every day I pray. I mean, please forgive me for what I put you guys through. So I put my parents through so much trauma that I think they knew where I was going bad, based on what my ego and my I don't know how you would say that, kind of like that jerky kid,
Mhm.
but my parents gave up on me. I'll be honest with you. My dad looked at me like a disappointment, and they kind of frustrated me. But I was like, all right, forget it. I'm that guy. And then my mom, bless her soul, she gave me the freedom to do what I wanted. She didn't say do this. She said. So one big example is that, like in the Asian community, one of the biggest things that they introduce us is like music, like musical, like instruments. So I play the violin. I played the violin from like 3 years old all the way to like 10 or 12, like concert piano, violinists and all that stuff. So I think that started the actual, like maybe some of the discipline, but I knew that it wasn't for me. I told my mom, this is not for me. And I need to be outside. I don't need to be inside. So she allowed me to go play sports and run around. And from that point on, my mom gave me that freedom. My dad, from one disappointment from the other, he's like, basically, you're not going to be anybody. So again, if it wasn't for the military, that was probably my parents. Really, they struck the heart into me to say, "Hey, listen, you've got to be a man. You can't joke around. You can't act like you know everything." So, but the lessons I learned in what I've been through is kind of like is normal conditioning now. It's nothing. It's not a big deal. Like I wish I can really like enhance what I'm trying to say as far as like the past, what I've been through. But when you're at a point where you're taking every task and you have challenges and it doesn't seem complex to you because you've been through so much in the past, it's just a stepping stone. It's just like a simple step that you have to go through. So
Right.
for you guys out there that are deciding what to do after high school and you're kind of lost, military, go in the military, and then it's only a couple of years. By the time you figure it out, it's time to get out. You may stay in, you may get out and go to college. You'll figure it out, but it's the best time to waste, right there in the military when you want to get wild and crazy. Go do it in the military. They'll give you some things to do. They'll make you chase some rocks around. They'll make you chase trees. They'll make you do all that good stuff, and then you'll come out like a better person.
Yeah.
And
So
that's what helped me out.
let's talk about the military for a minute, because I think probably the military then plus compared to the military today may be a little different in a broad perspective, but in the core I think it's more likely the same. As you were going into the military, and you obviously ascended to a pretty high level as a pilot and participating in all these launches, how did you go from step to step? Was it regimented, or was it something that you wanted to do?
Okay, so military is perfect for someone that have like too much like like for someone like me, like very like ADHD and needs direction and steps, military is perfect for you. They decide where to turn, where to walk, where to be at this time. It's a perfect environment for someone that needs that structure, that you have the ability to do things. You just need that kind of like that direction to go. And the military puts that real fast into you. But the neat thing about the military, like my dad was very strict. Mom was not so much, but dad was strict. So they would yell. My dad would yell at me and yell at me in the constant way of like typical Asian thing: stand up, take your shoes off, do all this stuff. And I would like, oh my gosh, But I was conditioned from a young age all the way. Then I got in the military. So when I went in the military, they were yelling at me. I said, that's it. Usually I get hit after I get yelled at. My dad does that. So I was like, this is easy, right? So it was very easy when I went in the military, from boot camp to training to all the special schools I went through and the flight. It was like, this is no big deal. They may yell at you, but just do your job and it becomes easy, and just take these little tests and keep going forward. So again, for those of you that don't have that type of like, you're intelligent, but it doesn't seem like you know the path, or you may have a path that doesn't seem possible, go in the military. The military somehow opens you up into a structured world that now when you get out, you apply anything to that structure and it becomes easy. It's almost like start your own business, become that person, be an engineer, be a doctor, be whatever you want to be, and just stick it in there, and it's simple. I tell everybody that's lost, go in the military. Easiest time in the world, fun time.
Yeah, well, that's great. That's a great story and great motivation for those out there that are looking to find themselves. You get out of the military, and then that's when you go back into college and to get your medical degree and so forth. How long a period of time did it take you to do that?
So I went through college, and then I had a little hiccup there. Not so much a hiccup, I get my girlfriend, now my ex-wife, pregnant. So then I decided it's time for me to be an adult. I've got to go ahead and marry her, and then so I take night schools, raise a family, and go through that process. So it took a little longer, but eventually, I you go through undergrad. Then I had a little bit of hiccup there. You have life hits you with a little bit of stumbling stones. So then you kind of like you do some soul searching. And then I go back to school, and at 35 years old, I go through, the chiropractor school, and then push through. And then lo and behold, I'm out in 3.5 years. And then I
Right.
started the world of like working.
And you, when you first started your residency, I guess, did you go into a hospital or a partnership, or what did you do?
So in chiropractic school, you don't really have a program like a residency. You're
Oh,
basically on your own. But the neat thing about me is that I was hired right away with UCLA. So I was fortunate enough. So now I'm working with top athletes. If you remember Kevin Love, Westbrook, those guys at UCLA. Well, I was working with those guys. Then you go to
okay.
the football side, then you go track side, water polo. It allowed me to see so many sports and their unique injuries pertaining to their position or their sport. So then I'm like, wow, I basically saw so much in that world of their particular injuries and how I can do preventative stuff, or, acute care or chronic care. And then the neat thing with that is that these kids, they go off, go to pros, go to the Olympics, and here I am going with them. I'm following them along. So now I'm into that world of the professional or the world type of stage. And
Right.
then now I'm getting to that caliber of athletes. Now I'm going to the higher. So it's almost like it's a kind of like an evolution from, you start off in the high school athletes and you go to college athletes. Now you're in the pro Olympians. Now it makes you go into the other world. So then I'm over here in Tampa, WWE, working with these athletes. Then I'm over here with the Bucks, working with them, traveling with them, doing all that stuff. Then you're working with the hockey. Then you're working with all these tennis players. So it opens up your whole spectrum of sports. And the neat thing about that is that when you have that experience over and over again of seeing this type of injury from these athletes, it becomes real easy to diagnose and treat these guys. So that's why you want to have someone experienced. If you're an active person, find someone like me.
Yeah. And you back on your path to that point of being in your profession and the road you travel. And a lot of these guys that you're working with have traveled that same road in a different way, but they've been rebellious. They've gotten in trouble. They've had their different things that's happened, and they found themselves in the sports world. So now you're working with athletes that are somewhat motivated the same way that you are, and I'm imagining this now, that helps you as far as the not only the treatment but being able to relate to them and communicate with them.
Yeah, you definitely want to find a provider like myself that's been in sports. You know, I played college, I played high school, so you can relate with them. They have their own priorities, how and why and what to do, right? So their mindset is set to a pattern where I need to get back on the field, because if I'm a professional athlete, I don't want this to determine my money, my worth, and my contract. So you have to think that way. So my job is to get them back as soon as possible and understand that and have a conversation with them. When the athlete don't really understand the therapy and they're questioning your knowledge, that's where it falls apart. You have to have a good conversation, a good bond, and a really like a good plan between the two of you to set a standard between the start point, the middle point, and the end point. When they see that they're making these marks, and they goes, all right, we should be at 50%, we're at 50%, exactly what you said, 100% at this point. Now, their mental side is confidence. They're knowing that you have the ability to take them to that finish line. And the most important thing is that they're back on the field. Exactly what you said. So that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to have that relationship with that athlete. So it's very important that, you know, I have that background where I was an athlete and understand them. And that's exactly what I want to hear. I want to hear, what are we going to do together? Where are we at? How do you know what you're doing is right? And then we educate each other and we know that this is where we're at, get on the same page and move forward.
Right. Well, working with these teams that you're working with, Tampa Bay Bucks, let's use them as an example. These are businesses, corporations that these athletes, they're spending a lot of money on them and investing in these athletes. And so they're counting on you in their, because I'm guessing, to tell me if I'm wrong, your direct relationship or contract, if you will, is with the team, not necessarily the player. So there's a situation there where the team wants you to get the player back out on the field as quick as possible. In some cases, the player, you know, wants to get back. How does that work with what you do as a profession?
Let me tell you, George, you just made yourself a big hit with the NFL, because there is that conflict between money, the player, and the production, right? So there's so much complicating factors in there. You have the team needs them out there, but then you have the injury, but you know it takes 2 weeks, but you have a game this week, you need them out there. Are you going to tell them the truth? Are you going to lie? I've seen all those plays, you know, all those little games of like, hey, you're not hurt that bad, but actually you're hurt really bad, because you know you want them out there. And it's a complicating thing. I walk on that line of just, I'm on the patient side, but also, you know, you got to be on the team. You've got to understand who's paying you and who you're taking care of. So I was fortunate enough to have a practice outside of the team. So I would have the therapy and the treatments, but with complicating cases, they would send patients to me in my office. And then from there, I would work on them for specific indications of like complex cases. And with that, it was easier there. I'm away from the team environment, and then we can work together and get them healed faster. So yeah, absolutely. There is a complicating dynamic between that world, between like the front office, the administration, the team, the coaches, then the players, then the individual. So you can see there's so much dynamic there. And all these players want to get, they want to get better. It's just that you have to understand that the body can only heal so fast. And that's why you want to get all the instruments, you know, to help them along. And if you're kind of like, you'll hear about it. I mean, there's some great stories up there, like teams lying about their injuries, saying you're not that hurt. And then sure enough, they go out there and they'll completely tear the ACL. Instead of a partial tear, you get a complete rupture. And then, you know, the athlete doesn't know if it's really happening during the process of that game or was it previous games. They don't know. So there's that little code of like secrecy of like, hey, don't tell them too much, just get them on the field. So yeah, I've seen all that stuff. I wish I can go more into it. Maybe I should write a book about that, huh?
Yeah. So let's kind of jump over to where you are now as far as publications. How many books? Maybe we can pull it up on the screen here. And how many books have you written? And tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so I wrote the book. So the reason why I wrote this book, The Future of Regenerative Medicine, they're on Amazon. I would explain exactly the different kind of stem cells. What are stem cells? Why are stem cells not so much live cells, but the signals? And then really describe it in two forms. There's one for the science side of it, so you can see all the actual, like the peptides, the information, the EVs, all these things. And then there's also a version of it where you can get the layman's version of it, where you can follow Jeff's journey, and it breaks it down so simple where you can understand it by just the description with Jeff's talking. So I want to make sure that the reader can get the full picture of stem cell, this regenerative medicine therapy, and then see where the future is going. So when you understand it's about these small molecules, what they call cell-free, meaning there's no nucleus, it's a smaller molecule. When it's a smaller molecule, well, you have a better ability to get it through the skin into the deeper tissue, so you could avoid those injections.
Mm-hmm. Good. And let's see the website. We got your book out there also.
Yep.
Okay,
That's my product right there. So that's a topical stem cell cream. So you can go on RheeGen.com and look it up and see, and there's a whole bunch of stuff in there about like data points of what it is, what's the whole idea of it, why injection is the old way and the new way is a topical. And there's links for all these science papers about this product, and really just understanding where the future is going. The future is going to the patient's hand. It's no more this doctor's visits, a high cost, these injections that may have risk factors of like tumor formation or infection or downtime. Now it's going to be a topical application where you just apply it on your skin, rub it in there, give it 30 days of daily application, and you'll get the same as the injectable without that risk factor or the high cost.
So typical injury, ankle sprain up to a neuropathy of the foot or wherever it may occur. Does it work for that?
Yeah. Anything. So we always have this ability of our body to recycle our cells. So we're doing like a 1-to-1 ratio. So one cell destroys, one cell is replaced. Every day we have that. But here's a problem. As we get older and we age, that signaling to have that cycle go 1-to-1 starts declining. So now it's like a 2-to-1, meaning that 2 cells destroy, 1 cell replaces. So when you get that cycle, now you're starting to go into the aging process. That's where you start getting the tendonitis and that neuropathy and stuff that really like doesn't have the ability to get your tissues back to its original state. You have to get that signal back up to get that ratio 1-to-1. So then you are growing that tissue back in that cycle. So that's why you need that signal. A signal is depleted in our body as we age, but if you introduce it from a source that where RheeGen is at, now you have the ability to get those signals back to that ratio. So then you can have that proper procedure of like recycling that tissue of the bad and the good.
Okay. And so you have this product that someone could go on your website and order it. Is that the way it works?
Yeah, it's a little more. It's one more step there. So RheeGen it's a specialized product. You have to have a doctor's script, and it's not a pharmaceutical drug, but it's for professional use only. So it has to go that pattern because it's from human tissue, and then the FDA says we have to take this pattern. You can't sell directly to the patient. So if you can contact me, and then I can point you to the right provider, and then they can actually do all that legal stuff. Now, the interesting thing is that now RheeGen is, it's based on human tissue. So the same signals that we are achieving from the human tissue source, and the human tissue source is from the umbilical cord, they call Wharton's jelly. In there are called mesenchymal stem cells. Mesenchymal stem cells sends out these signals in the form of what they call EVs. Sorry to say all these words here, but anyways, those signals are important because those signals are what we're trying to get into our body. Well, here's something great. There are signals in plant-based that have the same power as this human tissue signaling. Now, I'm developing that thing. We're so close. The patents, the testing, the FDA, we're going through all that processing, and we're excited about it because we're already made some good testing results out of it. So we're passing points. So hopefully in a couple more months, we'll have great news about this new product that's going to be on the market that's going to be plant-based. When that occurs, now you're saying, okay, I can skip the actual middleman and then I can sell directly to the consumer. Now the power is back in the patient's hands. When it's in the patient's hand, now they're having the luxury of understanding what to do, because there's so much information out there, it gets confusing. So now that you have the ability to capture information from AI, shows like this, and then understand what you have, you just got to understand, what do I do to cure it or fix it? Well, here's a product, RheeGen, with a 2 patent, and then also there's technology in there that does an incredible thing to signal your existing tissue to do its job. So that's what I'm excited about.
Great. Well, that sounds exciting. Now, you're on all social media or YouTube?
Yeah, yeah. I think the easiest way to find me right now is just Google me and YouTube and see, because I've done so many shows. My particular, my social media presence is terrible, so I apologize, but I'll get it back up there. It just takes that thing called, what's that thing called back in the old days? We used to get that a lot. Oh yeah, money.
Ah,
You need that thing, right? So, anyways, it's gonna take some time, but we'll get it up and running.
yeah. Well, it certainly sounds exciting. Great story. And you're growing up. I might ask, what area did your dad specialize in?
So he was a general surgeon. So
Okay.
he had a, let me tell you, my parents had a great story. So they were both born in Tokyo before the war. So one was born pretty before the war. So during World War II, when they were bombing Tokyo, my parents were kids then, and they were there during that part of the war. So they bombed Tokyo, was there. So after the war, the city's pretty much destroyed. They go to Korea. Well, they get there just in time for the Korean War. So now they have to do that, basically kind of like evacuate from the south and north. They're getting pushed around there. So they escape that. So now my dad's a surgeon. So Malaysia just got its independence. So they want doctors from other countries to set up their clinics inside the rural areas of Malaysia. And so my dad was hired to go set up a clinic in the jungles of Malaysia. So
Wow.
that's where I was born there. So in Malaysia, it was basically a surgical center that was run on generators and elephants to clear the ground. So that's one of my spiritual animals, is the elephant, because when I was a kid, I saw that all around, getting this landscaping done by elephants. So, but my parents, they've been through 2 wars, and then so when they come to the United States and they see this, it was back in when we first came to the United States, 1970. So it was during the Vietnam, like the demonstrations and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They thought that was normal. They thought it was no big deal, because, oh, look at that, another war, no hassle. So when we first came to Chicago during that 72, 75, and it was just from Malaysia to Chicago, and that was during those riots. So I remember like going to the park, and there was like just people just running around, smoke, bombs, everything. And I thought that was the neatest things in the world. I was like, look at this is fun here, not realizing it's kind of violent out there. So I'm like, so I guess what my parents been through, and then what I've seen in the violence and all that, I'm thinking like, oh, this is America. This is what the world's all about. But lo and behold, I think that gave me the good foundation of understanding, hey, things could be worse than where I'm at right now.
Yeah. So you were how old when you moved to Tampa?
Probably 7, 8, yeah, second grade, something like that, third grade.
Okay. So a lot of that had to do with some of that early childhood stuff that you had to deal with when you were that you were internalizing when you came to Tampa and started in middle school and high school there. I would imagine that some of that had to do with it, and also your father's kind of stance of what needed to take place as far as structure is concerned, given all of that they've been through in the 2 different wars.
Yeah. Hey, you remember those those ABC after school special shows? You remember that? That was my life. I was, an Asian family, immigrant moving into a country part of Tampa, and having that conflict of like my culture versus the American culture, and that put a whole twist on my upbringing. Just like, what is going on here? That I don't want to be here. Why am I different? And that kind of growth I went through. So that's probably why I rebelled a lot then too.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Rhee, I tell you, based off of what you've said to the audience here, your story, there's a lot of stories out there, especially today, with a lot of folks that have come in from different countries and dealing with different ethnic scenarios that are having some of those issues in the school system. So that you turned out to be a great example of how to make the best what you have to work with. So that we appreciate this podcast. It's been wonderful to hear about your success in the chiropractic field and the regenerative studies. So we're glad to have you on the show.
Man, I really appreciate it, George. It was a great talk. It almost feels like you're making me think about my past because, oh, yeah, I need to go dig a little harder to understand why I did those things. Yeah, no wonder why I went to jail.
If you ever get a chance, please get a read of my book, Catch as Catch Can, and which is turning obstacles to opportunity, and my story that coming from a very tough situation to being an entrepreneur, having played professional sports and being an entrepreneur. I have 16 restaurants there in the Tampa airport that hopefully, as you travel through there, that you may stop to visit. P.F. Chang's, Starbucks, Wendy's on the main terminal. Not sure which airlines you fly, but if you ever do, stop in and say hello.
Absolutely. Hey, I love stories that have like that typical adversity at the beginning, fight through it, and become successful in the end. I love those things. So yeah, absolutely. I'm going to take a look at that book.
Okay, we appreciate it. Well, thank you for being on the show and been spending time with us and educating us on the regenerative process and cells and things. That was probably my worst subject, science, in school, but it's been a great show, and I'm sure our audience will get a lot out of it.
All right, man. I really appreciate that. This is a fun talk. Thank you very much.
Number's just right down the road in Winter Haven, Florida from you,
Okay, then. There we go. I'm going to come on by and say hi then.
Yeah, we'll have to do that.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
This has been Catch as Catch Can. The game isn't over. Your success story is just getting started. Head to TinsleySpeaks.com for exclusive content, resources, and opportunities. Catch as Catch Can with George Tinsley Sr., a production of Live Stream Editors.